Clap your hands with me. Clap your hands with me. Clap your hands with me.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Midday Impact. I am co-hosting today again, and I'll introduce myself, and then I'll let my co-host do what she does. But I'm Cassie Martin, one of the leaders at FAI, and just excited to be with you all today for Midday Impact. Co-host, you want to introduce yourself to the people?
Yes, I'm Jackie Collins from FAI. So happy to be here, part of the leadership team too.
Yes. So we got a hot topic for you all today. And so today we're going to kind of deep dive into this idea of flying under the radar. So I guess if you want to say if there's a theme for today, we would say no more flying under the radar.
Mhm.
All right. So really this idea of shrinking, right? And no longer shrinking ourselves and holding back what God has really put in us and how he's built us, right? And so no more flying under the radar, no more hiding. And so the scripture that one of my very favorite scriptures is Jeremiah 29:11. And it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a future and a hope." And so God's plans are so vast for us. And he has, these great ideas, these big ideas for us. And a lot of times, just in my life, I've noticed that I will kind of shrink, because I don't feel like I measure up for whatever reason to what God is saying. So, so today we're going to kind of jump into this idea of flying under the radar. So just a few little quick questions to kind of give you an idea of where we're going with this. So if you've ever found yourself making yourself smaller so that you wouldn't stand out, in a room or in a situation, or, maybe sometimes it could look like staying quiet, even when you have the answer, not wanting to be the first one to raise your hand, or, even in the workplace, sometimes I've noticed like just holding back my ideas just because I didn't want to look like I was trying to push myself forward. And sometimes that can happen at work. It can happen at church, kind of everywhere.
Mhm.
And so I don't know. Why do you think, Jackie, why do you think just sometimes people may want to be more comfortable flying under the radar?
Well, sometimes it's personality, right? Some people have a more demure personality or just not outgoing. That could be one of the reasons. Another could simply be fear of being seen, right? What will people think? What do I have to say? Wow, I don't even like the way I sound when I speak. And a lot of criticism oftentimes people have about themselves, right? So if you're not good with you, then that's going to be a real good way that you'll shrink, right? I'm not good at how I appear to people, right? So that's very important to just think about, how do I feel about me, right? So if I feel as if I'm not enough, then I'm not going to present who I am. Because if I don't feel that I can be put out on front, then I don't feel other people will want to receive me and what I have.
Yeah, that's good. And it's interesting that you said, being good with me, right? I do not enjoy the way I sound. I hated my voice for the longest time. Singing, speaking, I was like, oh, I have man voice. Like whoever, somebody said it along the way, and I probably just adopted it and tagged it onto myself. But you are absolutely right. It wasn't until I got comfortable with, okay, this is the voice God gave me.
Right.
I can't really do much about it. It is what it is, right? That I started kind of moving out more and not shrinking as much. But there's safety, right? Flying under the radar. People don't have any expectations. They're not critiquing you or criticizing. There's no risk because you are literally not putting yourself, not putting yourself out there.
That's it.
Um, but what happens is we get so comfortable being hidden or unseen that then we start hiding what God really intended for us to use, and
Mhm.
what I know about God and his gifts. And you know this, I'm sure too. He didn't place these gifts, the wisdom, the experience in us so that we can hide them. So, we can't stay quiet. We gotta come out of hiding,
Mhm.
if you will. And so, I want to just kind of talk a little bit about this idea of humility versus hiding. Um, so, when we think about humility, like true humility says, I have something to offer. God has placed something inside of me, but I know where it came from, right? I know that it came from God. I'm not bragging, I'm not boasting. And as Christians, we are called to be humble and to walk in humility. But how do we know when humility becomes hiding? How can we kind of know when it's no longer humility, now where you flat out hiding, right?
Right. Right. I think one of the big things is when God has called you to do something, you know absolutely that He has called you to do this, but you simply aren't doing it. And some part of that kind of rolls into disobedience. We can kind of be in that particular situation, but again, when we hide, it's something that we're fearing. you know? And that could really be a fear that you haven't really completely dealt with, right?
Mhm.
So much happens. Me as a therapist, I see people and we look so much at their history, right? And if you want to figure out what's going on with people in so many respects, just go back to their
Mhm.
history, find out about their origin. And it's so many times you'll find out what's going on and why people are acting the way they are. You may have to be rather intuitive to really get it, but it's there. There are
Yeah.
things that have happened to people that have caused that. How about a person has tried to put themselves out there? They may be someone that's not an outgoing person, but they tried to put themselves out there and they felt rejected. You know, they felt as if they weren't heard or it was kind of like minimized, whatever it was. Well, I'm shrinking,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, I just am. I just am. And in that case, it's like I need to cover myself. I don't want to be abused because in a case like that, you probably were hurt,
Mhm.
especially if you weren't someone that's used to doing that, and you know how much that must have taken for a person to just I'm going to do it, and
Mhm.
then I mean we have people that are that don't think about the way they
Got
say
that right.
things, right? And they don't know what those words could do, right? And so it could just be something very small that a person says, right? But it's kind of cutting to that person who put themselves out there, right? So in that particular case, it's understandable why a person would hide.
Yeah. Yeah, and I find just even in working with children, and so I taught school for a little bit. I taught fourth graders, and then I taught middle school for a little bit. And
Mhm.
and what I'm finding is a lot of times what parents say to their children as they're developing their personalities, as those little personalities are coming alive,
Mhm.
those things have lasting impact as
Oh, yeah,
well,
they do. Yeah, they
right? And
do.
so if you want to know, like you said, tracing that history, a lot of times that shrinking can be found. It can we can see it. It started as a child, right? Maybe
It's
that
true.
that child was very talkative, right? And maybe that parent said, you talk too much, you need to be quiet, or
Mhm.
be seen and not heard. Now I understand in essence what they meant when they said that, like, don't butt into, as a child, don't be barging in or butting into adult
Mhm.
conversations. But if it's not explained that it's just when adults are speaking, right? Don't push in, use your manners, that kind of thing. It goes into the brain as, or it computes as, be silent, right? What you
Exactly.
have to say is not valuable, or you talk too much. And so it immediately causes you to now start second guessing that, but that could be a blessing, right? A child that talks, a lot. That could be, as far as investing in that, we don't know what that career might yield down the road. But again, when you said that, it made me think about that. A lot of times that first touch or that first experience with shrinking happens sometimes, in the home.
Right, absolutely. And just so often parents, they have no idea what they're depositing,
Mhm.
right? And many times this is what they got. It's what
True.
they received from their parents. Shut up,
Yep.
be quiet, that constant thing, right? As if the child's voice doesn't mean anything, as if they don't have worth. And then that's how they begin to develop these type of things that cause them not to want to speak, right? That they minimize themselves as a result of, how they've been treated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so, and even just kind of getting back into the humility versus the hiding piece, it is one thing to walk in humility, right? Just acknowledging everything I have came from God. He's the source.
Mhm.
But the hiding piece goes back to, I don't want anybody to know what I can do. I don't want anybody to know that I have anything. And that's not the same thing, right? Hiding humility is not the same thing. And
Mhm.
so another issue that I've seen, in my life and just in working with others in coaching, um, a lot of people struggle to receive compliments.
Oh yeah.
So immediately, like somebody will compliment you and you'll say, oh, it was nothing. But sometimes it wasn't nothing, right? We worked, you studied, you prepared, you made sacrifices. And so acknowledging what God has developed, it's not arrogance, it's a sign of good stewardship.
Mhm.
But for whatever reasons, sometimes we struggle to receive those compliments. And so, and we'll start minimizing the gifts. So I got another question for you, Jackie. So have you ever minimized like a gift or a skill? I mean, even an experience, because you didn't want to appear prideful? And if so, how did you overcome that?
Hmm. Well, I would say one big experience that I minimized and would not really talk about was my MS diagnosis
Okay.
because of how I could be perceived as a result, right?
Wow.
People didn't know me as Jackie with MS or a woman with MS, right? So I hid it for a very long time. I didn't tell people what was going on with me. But as a result, I learned that I was causing people not to receive a blessing from what I had experienced, right? I had gone through this for a very long time and I prevailed through it with the help of God. But with me not speaking on it, who could know? Who can know that there's hope for them, right? Their
Right.
situation seems so extremely dire that there's no way out. But there is a way out because of a testimony, right?
Mhm.
Because of a testimony. And one day I realized, I said, God, this is something that I have to reveal, right? But one of the things, I'll be real, one of the reasons why I didn't reveal for a long time was the church.
Mm. Wow.
Because of the perception that we have, I'm being real, in
Uh-huh.
faith-based ministries on healing, right? So if you're not healed, what's going on with your faith? And you
Wow.
would be so surprised with some of the things that were said to me, right? That I had to overcome and say, but that can't stop me. So a lot of it was for not pride, but protection.
Wow.
Right? Protecting myself, and especially if you're going through something so detrimental, trying to keep yourself built up emotionally,
Mhm.
mentally, and spiritually is a job in itself. And
Yeah.
to be able to live life every day in the midst of that, right? So to have that thought of people saying things that weren't the kindest, honestly, but I think it's just the fact that people don't really understand. So, but what I had to again say is this is worthy of people
Yes.
knowing, right? Because later the responses that I received, so many for years, responses of what that did, and being able to talk about how I was able to go through all this, to be real quick, to be in school for 7 years straight,
Mm.
during that time, having a baby, a young child, working full time, traveling, doing an internship and school. Today, I know that it could only have been by the hand of God,
Yeah.
and always operated in excellence, always dean's list, etc. So I
Mm.
believe also that God made me a specimen to show that no matter what Satan can put before us,
Mhm.
I'm greater than that, right? When
Yeah.
my neurologist said to me during the diagnosis, he said to myself and my husband, he said, some way your brain has been compensating for this loss because you shouldn't be functioning like this.
Lord.
But again, I was in school all that time, dean's list after dean's list after dean's list after dean's list. And one of the issues with MS is cognitive
Okay.
abilities, right? Can really cause a big problem there. But it's like God, he did something amazing, and it was amazing for people to see. And I'm gonna tell you something, this was most incredible. I could read a book or read chapters and be able to photographically remember what was on the pages. So when I would go to do essays, I would just write so much until I had to stop myself
Mm.
because I could remember and recall, but that's not how it's supposed to be. So if I would have held that and not told people about that, how terrible and how much of a disservice to God would that have been?
A tremendous disservice. And as you were speaking, the thought, when the doctor said your brain is somehow compensating, the scripture in Romans, all things work together for good, right?
Mhm.
Every part of your body, every part of your life,
Absolutely.
every part of your mind
Mhm.
was working together for God's eternal outcome. And I just want to offer apology to those people. And I don't know who it was, but that spoke ignorantly to you in that time, because
Mhm.
like you said, just people sometimes don't know what to say. And my suggestion in those moments is just don't say anything.
Exactly, exactly. I'm praying for you. I think that's a real good one, right? Real
Absolutely.
simple. I'm praying for you because you just don't understand. So we don't need to talk about all the things about your faith and everything like that, and just all of those things that are off. So that's just something to so many to just think about. Just when someone is ill and when they're struggling, just if you don't have words of true encouragement, just let them know that you're praying.
That's an excellent an excellent way to approach. Always
Mhm.
prayer is always acceptable.
Mhm.
And so one thing I will say about myself, so a lot of times I would apologize for being prepared or apologize for who God created me to be.
Mm.
And here's the thing, when God brings us into moments, we don't have to apologize for the experience
Mm.
that He's had or what He's done to prepare us to get to a place. Um, so what I want to encourage everybody to think about, all the viewers and even us, just what did it cost you to become who you are today?
Right.
Think about it. Every sacrifice, every hurdle, every opportunity that we've had to shut down, negative self-talk, shut down chatter that came from
Mhm.
other people. So, because a lot of times what people see is the finished product, right? They
Oh yeah.
see the degree, but they don't see the nights you were up late studying, or the things that you had to sacrifice to get there. They see promotion, but
Yep.
they don't see everything it took for you to get there. Maybe going nights where you didn't have food, making
Mhm.
sacrifices where you limited income. I remember,
Mhm.
eating ramen noodles. I remember those things that, I remember basically not having, grocery money, things that
Mhm.
had to be sacrificed. I'm not going out with the group, right? Sometimes
Yep.
just staying back because I needed to study and do what was necessary. And so, a lot of times people see that confidence, but they don't see every disappointment, the heartbreaks, the things
My
that
God. Right.
along with it. And so
Mhm.
what I try to do now is just embrace every opportunity that God puts before me and celebrate that, and just continually remember, I don't minimize that he's using me, because here's the thing. We are the vehicle that he's using, to do these things. We are the conduit, I guess is the better word. And so we don't, yes, he could use somebody else, but he didn't, right?
Right.
He chose to use us. And
Right.
so,
Right.
we don't have to apologize. I think about Joseph, right, in the Bible. He went through a whole lot of stuff,
Oh yeah.
a
Mhm.
whole lot of hardship. Family cut him off, being in prison, being all the things before he got to the place of the palace.
That's it.
But when he got there, the king signed off on him.
Mhm.
That was it, right?
Yep.
And he made no apologies for being there. So, um, what can you share, just about that? Just, I would love to hear kind of maybe what you've learned or developed, that maybe there was a time that you were apologizing for something, but you said no more.
Mhm. Mhm. One thing that I would say, I no longer apologize for my needs,
Hmm.
whatever that might be, because we can easily apologize. Oh, I'm sorry, but whatever. I'm sorry for asking this particular thing, right? Because for one, I mean, I've have always been a person that would do it all myself,
Hmm.
just do it all myself, just run, 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 even during the midst of an illness, right? But not understanding that there are people that God has placed in our path and placed in our life to help, right? I remember rejecting help so many times. And I think honestly, it wasn't on purpose, but it was more so, I can do this. This
Yeah.
disease hasn't gotten me. You see what I mean? It hasn't gotten me to that point that even though, yeah, I needed the help, but I can do this. I can do this. I am not disabled, So to be okay with saying that I have a need, and that's even in business environments, right? Um, there may be something in particular that's necessary for this to come off well. I need someone to assist me, right? Maybe I can do it, but why do it all? And I think that is being sucking up pride,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, because sometimes you just got to suck it up. I need assistance.
Yeah.
Why break and beat yourself down when there is the ability for others? God has placed so many of us, right? We think about in the church, it shouldn't be just a couple of,
Mm-mm.
right? He's given us all gifts. And I think this is all a part of what we're talking about, that we are not always using those gifts, right? And even apologizing, almost like you said, for having particular gifts, because here's the thing, what are they going to think? Are they going to think I'm trying to be more than? Am I trying to be better than someone else? Which is, I mean, let's be real. There can be competition in church. I'm just
Ooh.
being very, very real, right?
Yes.
Because
Yes. Come on.
I've been in this for a long, long time, and I've seen it, right? So when we see those kind of things happening, we want to work on squashing that, right? That we all come with our own
Mhm.
uniqueness, right? Just because you can do something more efficiently than then that's great. I applaud. How can I help you if necessary? The same thing you do for me,
Mhm.
for others. And that's how the whole body works well together, right? And it's
Yes.
not fragmented because we're all trying to do our own thing and trying to get our glory. And I always say to God, cause my mind to be controlled by you
Mhm.
when you have something for me to say, right? Not my will, but
Yeah.
yours be done, right? Because I want God to get the glory in whatever it is that I say or do.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes. And I'm glad you mentioned that competition thing, because that used to be a big thing for me, a big I'm not a competitive person unless we're playing unless I'm playing spades. Don't judge me.
Uh-huh. Cool.
Spades or Taboo, my favorite game to play. I love playing Taboo, and so those things I'm competitive in. But when it comes to kingdom things, I'm not. I don't compete.
Mhm.
I believe that if I am a finger in the body, then or an arm, then I'm supposed to be the arm, and somebody else is the other arm. And,
Right.
it's no competition because we all have a contribution to make. And so I really want to just kind of enhance that, or not, I guess second that what you just said, because even when you have new people coming into ministries that are maybe established, the ministry's established and everybody has a function, everybody has a role, and it's kind of like, well, I'm new, how do I fit in, where can I get in? There's a place, there's a
Mhm.
place for you, because even if we I always like to say this, even if we have a similar function,
Yeah.
your unique fingerprint is going to reach a certain group, in the ministry, and then mine will reach, but
That's
it
right.
will all be for the building of the kingdom. That's what the purpose of, the ministry gifts are, is to build the kingdom. And so, I may not be able to sing like Pastor Dunn, but there's a place for my voice
That's it.
in
Mhm.
ministry, right? Or I
Right.
may not be able to preach like Pastor
Mhm.
Dunn, but I don't have to, because what God is holding me responsible for is, did you do what I placed in you?
Right.
Right? Did you show up as you? Because
Right.
he don't need any cheap copies of somebody else. If he wanted a
Yeah.
copy of somebody else, he would have made a copy. But
That's
no,
it.
he gave us all
Right.
our individual talents. And
Yeah.
even this idea of and so I have Pastor Cassie on the screen. Now,
Mhm.
I'm not hung up on titles, but it used to be very hard for me to embrace that, because I felt like I wasn't I was comparing myself to other people as pastors. And so my bishop, before we came to FAI, he said, "No, this is who God called you to be. You're ordained. So stop shrinking like it." But I'm not promoting myself.
Yeah.
God did this,
Yeah.
God saw
Mhm.
this. And I'm saying that just because a lot of people, are like, "Well, why does she have that there?" And it's really because it was hard for me to do.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
a part of my overcoming and embracing it is put it up there. It doesn't make me any better than anyone else, but it just is me saying, "Yes, God, I agree with who you called me to be."
Right. And it sounds like it doesn't necessarily mean you feel like people have to call you pastor,
No.
in order to be okay with that role, but it is a role that you rightfully received that role.
Ye-
So
Yes,
that's a
ma'am.
good thing. Mhm.
And I look at it no different, because okay, so here another similar example. People that have earned their doctorate degree,
Yep.
right? They've
Mhm.
gone through and earned that, and I've been in circles where, situations where people have been, well, why I'm not calling that person doctor, and I'm like, well, why not? They went to school, they earned it. It doesn't make them better than it. Just, it's just an honor that they've earned. And so,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that person should not have to shrink themselves to make someone else comfortable. That's another thing I'm
Mhm.
noticing, that sometimes people will shrink themselves, they will make themselves. So it's this idea of, and this shows up a lot at work, making yourself small in a room so that somebody else can be comfortable.
Exactly.
It's not fair
Exactly.
either. That's robbery too.
Right. And you know that they're struggling, right? They're
Yeah.
struggling to find their place. Where is it that I fit, right? And we do in so many regards, right? Try to figure out, where do I fit? That happens in the church. Where do I fit? But we just need to also know that every joint does supply, right?
Yes.
Every piece, every part is important for the whole establishment and building of the body, to keep the body sound, to keep the body flowing and functioning well, right? Just like we
Yes.
need to put nutrients in our body, right?
Hmm.
In order for them to function well, right? So we need to, if we have a hurt arm, right? We need to do something to work on that arm. But thank goodness that we have that hand, right?
Right.
That helps, right? So every piece is important and every person is important. And I think um, it's just so important to be okay with who God has made us to be. Just to be okay with that. But you know what? Sometimes it's easy to say, but not, it's simple to say, but not always easy to do. Just simply say, you need to do what God has called you to do.
Hmm.
However, you can have circumstances in your life that have caused you to be so beat down that you feel like just getting to church is pretty miraculous.
Right. Right. Well,
Because
I've definitely been there.
what's going on in your life, life disruptions,
Yes. Talk
you know,
about it.
there's so many things in life that can disrupt, you know, our plans and what we feel should be. I work with, aside from therapy, I work with successful, accomplished midlife women who are trying to reclaim their identity
Mhm.
after life disruptions, right? And those life disruptions can be divorce, it could be a loss, it could be caregiving, it could be, employment situations, loss of employment, even retirement, right? These things have disrupted your equilibrium. So
Mhm.
how do I get to that stable place? I'm having a hard time doing that. I'm having a hard time figuring out what's next. But it's a matter of reclaiming yourself, but not going back to that old self.
Mhm.
You still could be you, but not go back to that old self. You want to be a better version of yourself. And how do you become a better version of yourself, right? You have to face what those disruptions have done, right?
Mhm.
You have to name the disruption. That's first of all. You have to
Yeah.
name it. What happened, right? How do I manage after that thing has happened, right? And then we need to release those things that are no longer working well for us. We need
Mhm.
to get rid of them. And then we need to rebuild healthy connections, because a lot of times those connections that we've had have not been healthy. They're off. Then we need to reclaim our desires as a person. What is it that I want? What is it that I desire? It matters that I have desires. And then we want to reclaim our voice. I have something to say. I don't have to shrink.
Mhm.
Even though these things have happened, I've had these disruptions in my life, but I don't have to shrink, excuse me. And
Mhm.
then ultimately, we want to live in freedom.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Yep. So if we could think of doing those particular things, it would help us be able to not discount and go under the radar,
Yeah.
right? Because we
Yes.
feel a greater sense of who we are. And I think that's so important, because if you don't have a great sense of who you are, it doesn't matter. It doesn't
Right.
matter all these things around you, all these things, accolades, and all of that. But if you don't have a great sense of self, then really you're faking.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
For sure. And
Yep.
that is, I don't know. So I'm going to go back. So you said name the disruption, then release
Mhm.
the things that no longer serve you,
Yes.
um, rebuild healthy connections, and then reclaim your desires. And so what rang out to me through all that, just different wording, break up with the old story.
Yep.
In
That's
order
good.
to not fly under the radar, we got to break up with that old story. So there's the
Mhm.
story that we've been used to rehearsing,
That's it.
again, whether it's a story that somebody told us about ourselves or a story that we've just come to believe because of, whatever the labels, the things. And so we have to break up with that. But then we also have to silence the old voice.
Yep.
And my biggest thing was, well, how do I do that? But you have to retrain your brain, right? You have to get around people that kind of speak that new language, that speak
Mhm.
into who you are now, and
Yep.
don't allow you to stay, in that low place of
Mhm.
yesteryear or before. And so it is not something that just happens overnight, to your point earlier,
Mhm.
but it's a series of taking those moments as they come. When the negative thought comes in the moment, bringing that thought captive, bringing it subjective to what God says now. And so how does that look practically? If the thought comes, I'm not good enough, if
Mhm.
that comes to my mind, then my combat is that, well, what does the word say? Yeah,
Mhm.
no, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, right?
That's it.
Or
Yep.
I can't do anything, right? No, I can do all things through Christ who
Mhm.
strengthens me. And
Yep.
that I went through that kind of series, and it was over and over, and I felt like it was multiple times a day I
Mhm.
was having to retrain, because I don't know what the statistics say, but there's a lot of thoughts can go through a mind in a day.
Yep. Yes.
A lot.
Thousands and thousands. Yep.
Right.
Mhm.
And so for every one of those thousand times that those negative thoughts came, I had to be diligent with the word and fighting
Mhm.
back. And that's the
Exactly.
other thing. We sometimes we don't fight back, right? We'll disqualify ourselves before anybody has the opportunity to. And a
Mhm.
lot of times that is to what you said earlier, that fear of rejection. Well,
Yeah.
if I count myself out now, then nobody else will, I don't have to feel the pain of somebody else doing it.
That's it. That's it. And I think also, you know, again, when you're worn down, it's hard. It's so hard to think clearly. I just can remember times in my life. It's like I can't do anymore. I can't do anymore. Just to wake up and breathe. That's a good day, right?
Wow.
Because life has presented so much. And it's but so much that the mind can take,
Yeah.
and accept well. You're gonna have to do something with that, you know, all that information, all that energy. What are you gonna do? But thank God for Jesus, right? who
Yes.
who helps to balance
Thank
us
you,
when we
Lord.
feel like we're going that we can tip over, because there's a fine line between sanity and insanity. Let's be real, right? And certainly we know with God, He can keep our mind in perfect peace, right?
Mhm.
But
Yes.
we have to be in His presence, right? In order for that to happen, we have to be able to sit there. But thank God, even when we're not all the way there, God is so gracious.
Yes, he is.
He is so gracious. He's so gracious when we just really are missing it. He is gracious, and that's why it's a heart thing. That's what I'm thankful for.
Mhm.
Not religion, but relationship.
Yes, ma'am.
That's key. That's key. Relationship will cause us to be able to persevere through whatever, because God is there.
Yeah, yes.
regardless, right? And so we don't have to worry about what people are saying, right? Um, it's about me and God. There comes a point that that's what it is.
Yes. And yes.
That's it.
That's it. And then
Mhm,
as he begins to restore us, like, because what when you said being worn down,
mhm,
being in his presence is how we are built up, right? By being built up in our most holy faith. And when he
mhm.
begins to restore us,
Yes.
that little in through that relationship, that's when we begin to show up different. That's when we begin to say, okay, I believe the new story.
Mhm,
I'm not
mhm.
just saying words, to create a new story that I don't believe, because we got to believe.
Yeah.
That's the other key piece,
Yeah,
right?
we
I
do.
can say words all day, but if I don't believe the words that I'm
Yeah.
saying, or if I don't believe the word that God has spoken, it's not going to go it's just words,
Right.
right? And so that retraining, that relationship, like you said, God, he didn't care how many times I had to come back to him and say, can you help me fix my thinking? Help me transform my mind. Help me. He don't get caught up on that, right? It is because of relationship and with his loving kindness that he draws us in. So it's almost like the expectation of the relationship is come into my presence,
Mhm,
see who I say, learn who I say you
mhm.
are, and then move forward to your point in the freedom that is there. There is no freedom like being who God has called you to be, not
Mhm,
competing, not comparing, not
mhm,
trying to figure out I gotta throw my voice like this to sound
mhm.
like this person, or I gotta wear these clothes to look like this. No, there is no greater freedom than basically flying free versus under
Yep,
the radar, right? Flying free in who God,
exactly.
has created us to be.
Right. And
So
I was gonna also say, when we're free in God, then it doesn't matter if, say, we're in a circumstance that we're not chosen for something that we're qualified for, right? Because there's times that can happen, right?
yeah.
But you're so sound in God, in your relationship, that hey, that's not what you had for me ultimately.
Mhm.
Apparently, and I'm not tripping, because I know you got me. That's what I think. It's like it's amazing because God, He has us if we
Yeah,
allow Him to.
that's the key, the allowing, because it is sound and mature,
Mhm.
right? When I can say, that just wasn't for me. So there, it takes a maturity with
Yes, it
that as
is.
well. I like to use this example. So recently, my supervisor resigned,
Mhm.
and I did not want her job. I didn't. Yeah, it would have been the next level up as far as leadership, but
Mhm.
I knew within myself, and me and the Lord, we talked about it. This is not something I need right now or I
Mhm.
desire right now,
Mhm.
because it's not a match for the other parts of my
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
To some, they might have looked at that as, well, that's the next natural step for you. Why don't you do that? No,
Mhm.
the maturity says there's somebody better on my team, better
Mhm.
suited for that. Let them go for it. Now, what I did do, I raised my hand and said I would like a promotion in the current step where I'm at.
Mhm.
And the Lord provided for that. But again, I don't care that somebody else is better suited for that role. That's maturity, right?
Yes, it is.
And understanding what's in you and what you're supposed to be doing right now.
Yep.
So yes, no skin off my nose that somebody else gets to do this, somebody else gets to preach, somebody else gets to pray. When the other thing I know about God is his timing is perfect.
Isn't it?
And when it's time for us to fly
Yeah.
above the radar,
Mhm.
it's gonna be like that mama bird kicking that baby out of the nest. You got to go, you got to get out
You
of here. It's
you
time to
have
do
to.
the thing, right?
You have to. Yep. Yep. It's time. Yep. It's time. Wow. Wow. This is so awesome. So awesome. Just to know that God has a place for us all.
Yeah,
But we have to be willing to accept. That's the key. Because it could
that's
be laid out, right? Like on a platter. But if you don't accept it, then it's just there, right? And you're missing out, right? It's not God missing out, it's you. And others are.
that part.
Yep.
Yes.
Because what you have to say is imperative
Hmm.
to your community. and even the world, depends upon what the situation is, right?
Absolutely, yes. And it's not even, the goal, and I know we're going to get ready to wrap up here in a moment, but the goal is not put the attention, right, on me, attention. The goal is obedience, right? And being obedient to the things that God has called us to. And like I said, you may not be, called to preach and teach and do all that, but there's a gift in you nonetheless. And this is for anybody that's watching or listening. It may not be a big quote unquote platform, but guess what? If it's two people that you're led to share your story with, that's your big platform.
Yes, it
Because
is.
God is going to judge you for how you showed up with your talent, the gifts that He's placed inside of you for your two people
That's it.
versus somebody that is meant to reach 2,000. And so I really hope that as you're watching, that you are getting that understanding that what you have is valuable. You matter. You matter.
Yes.
And so no more shrinking,
Yes.
no more hiding, no more apologizing.
Mhm.
But it's time to really train yourself, get that new story going, reclaim, as Jackie said, reclaim your
Mhm.
life after that disruption and walk in who God created you to be. So before we go, Jackie, do you have any closing thing that you want to share with the people?
I just say, be who God has called you to be, right? Be okay to be different. You don't have to be like everyone else, right? And there's people that you see and it's like, wow, you may have this thing like, wow, they're so great, right? But you're great too.
Yes.
You're great too.
All right. Well, I think that sums it up for today. You're great too. So
Yeah.
no more flying under the radar. Thank you all for joining us. Join us tonight on our social media platforms for Bible study at 7 p.m. And then join us Sundays at 1:30. We meet every Sunday at 1:30 in Cincinnati. So if you're local, please get in the building. And thank you again for joining us. Have an amazing rest of your week.
Bye, everyone.